Welcome to the assembly of iron. Okay, let's start with the pull. The common kill order is Steelbreaker, Mage, and Brundir. Split them up all around the room, but make sure that Brundir is well over 30 yards away from everyone else except his tank because of his overload ability. Steelbreaker. The first thing you'll notice is his high voltage aura that deals 2,500 nature damage every 3 seconds. Just heal through it. Then you've got his fusion punch. This is 100% weapon damage plus 17k nature damage per second on the tank only. It's a periodic effect he has. You need to make sure you focus heal on the tank and dispel the debuff, the fusion punch debuff on the tank so that he stops taking the extra nature damage. Aside from that, when Mage casts his Rune of Power, when it appears under the Steelbreaker's feet, make sure you move him off it. Players of course are invited to stand in it to gain the benefit of the extra damage it allows you to cause. Also make sure you've got somebody ready to spell steal the Shield of Runes from Mage. This absorbs up to 50k damage, and if all that damage is absorbed, then the caster's damage is increased by 50% for 15 seconds. That will generally wipe out the tank on Mage. So that's Steelbreaker really. If you decide not to take him down first, then you're going to have to deal with 2 extra abilities. If you take him down second, then you're going to have to deal with something called Static Disruption, which is an AoE effect on a 6-yard zone cast. Any players hit by it get 7,500 nature damage, plus a debuff that increases the nature damage taken by 75% for 20 seconds. If you take him down last, then you're going to have to deal with something called Overwhelming Power, which leads to Meltdown. Cast on the tank, he gains 200% damage for 30 seconds, and then blows up, which is effectively the Meltdown, killing himself and any other player within 20 yards. Because of the electric charge effect of the boss, this means that Steelbreaker is healed 15% of his maximum health and gains 25% extra damage anytime a player dies. So that's pretty much a wipe, not only from just the amount of players you just lost, but also the amount of damage he can now do.
My death only serves to hasten your death.
Okay, Mage. We've already dealt with his abilities, Rune of Power and Shield of Runes, but now that Steelbreaker is dead, he gains something called Rune of Death. This is another AoE based attack, a bit like Death and Decay. He chucks it on the floor, big green zone, 26-yard radius. Does up to 6,000 damage a second, so you need to move your backsides quickly. Sometimes you'll see a Rune of Power cast on the floor and you all dive on it, and then you'll find that you've got Rune of Death under you as well. So unfortunately you need to move away from your glorious Rune of Power before you find yourself turning into a glorious corpse. Finally on Mage, if you decide to take him out last, then you're going to have to deal with a second ability that he gains called Rune of Summoning. This ability summons lightning elementals that randomly targets members of the raid and moves towards them. If they reach the player they've targeted, then they do Lightning Blast, which is a 30-yard explosion of 15,000 nature damage. And this does cause them to die, but obviously you want to take them out before they reach their target, and whoever is targeted by them needs to move the hell out of the way until they've been killed.
Decipher this! Decipher this! legacy of...
And lastly, Brundir. Okay, he's been doing something called Chain Lightning or Fight. Since you did the initial pull, the tank's been on the target, should have been interrupting this so it doesn't hit anybody in the raid. This is one of his standard abilities, not one of the abilities he gains when any of his 2 comrades dies. His other ability is something called Overload, which I mentioned at the start of this fight. It's 30 yards range and causes 25,000 nature damage. It's a slow charge, similar to abilities you'll have seen in other fights. And you need to make sure you're well out of the way of this. Sometimes you decide to let the tank soak it up with a bit of focused healing, just so that the boss isn't moved, but this is entirely your call. Now, the 2 extra abilities that he does gain. First of all, when Steelbreaker goes down, or Molgene for that matter, he gains something called Lightning Whirl, which is where he throws out lightning bolts at random targets in the raid for around about 6,500 to 7,500 nature damage. Last 5 seconds, throws a bunch of lightning bolts out. It is interruptible, and you should interrupt it where you can to minimise raid damage, but it isn't a big deal to heal through as long as it doesn't keep hitting the same target. And the pretty effect that he gets when he's the last target to go down is something called Lightning Tendrils. He clears his ag list, which is very important, and floats up in the air, a bit like Doc Ock on many legs of lightning, so to speak, and starts to chase certain people around the room. The person that's targeted needs to run away. Everyone else needs to stay away from the tendrils, otherwise you start to get a lot of damage, around about 8k per second. And after a while it'll come back down to the floor. Now bear in mind that you need to stop DPS at this point and let the tank pick up the boss again, otherwise you're going to find he starts running around all over the place. He cannot be taunted in this phase with lightning tendrils, as is usual when he's got a reset threat ability all combined in there, and when they start to chase random targets. Pretty much a similar thing in the game. Okay, so that's about it really. Good luck with the rest of your fight.
Let the storm clouds raise and rain down death from above.